Hello, everyone. The title of today's episode is The Chair of Existence. And so, this idea, this concept I would like to share is an abstract concept. Because this is a live stream, I think I should do this at the beginning. Ladies and gentlemen of the digital realm, this live stream is, in some sense, a vocal notepad for me to just share ideas that I've been wondering about. And so, the chair of existence, this title refers to how, in my earlier talks, and one of them where I was just re-listening to it to see what I said that day, I noticed myself asking this question: what kind of chair of existence are you sitting in? And so there was this notion, there was this idea that every human being is sitting on their own chair of existence. This is the concept I'm bringing, that every person is sitting on their own chair of existence, this chair, but this chair is not made from uh, like wood or substance. It is made from beliefs that are fundamentally have in some sense accumulated and have become the foundation of the building. You see, let us look at life as if an architect's eyes were found in an eagle, and as this eagle is flying, it is noticing in some sense that the foundations are set forth first and then the building is made. But when the building is being made and the top floor hasn't been made, that's where it's like the foundations are no longer to be concerned or worried about. You don't worry about your earliest beliefs, you know, but they are still foundations for how you see the world now. I had a very interesting conversation with my cousin, and he knew a lot about Gurdjieff, to a point where he felt he had even looked through Gurdjieff's eyes, when he was alive. But anyways, how would I say this? In our conversation about the origin of mystical practice, here, I'll just continue like this. Henry David Thoreau has this wonderful quote where he says, "It's not what you're looking at that matters, it's what you see." And in some sense, it's not how I'm saying it that matters, it is the concepts conveyed. So when we look at that building and the architecture of the building, and that there are foundations that have in some sense been hidden in the psyche of man, you know, and I like, the only thing about psychiatry I like is the derivation, is the derivation of the word, which in some sense means spirit. And the spiritual practices, they consider the breath as the life force. And in some sense, this is very obvious because you would see people that when they die, they would stop breathing. And it's like when you saw a person die back in the day before technology was, able to preserve them longer, they would in some sense just as if like there was something in the body and then their eyes suddenly close. It's as if something that was animated becomes inanimate. Do you see that as death? So, in some sense, we are all animations of natural life intelligence that will at some point become inanimate. When we realize that we will become inanimate, that means the body is a temporary facility. It is a temporary vehicle for this mysterious attention that we don't know if it exists in another dimension or not, you know. In some sense, some people will realize that their minds are endless because the capacity for it to extend has no boundary, especially when you're a tiny creature in a material vastness. Do you see, like, I don't find my audiences are just people. When I give these talks, you know, there's some subscribers and audiences that YouTube cannot give me analytics for, because my audience is a universe of a billion trillion stars. It is the vastness of existence where my eyes have dared to open. They have dared to open because biology's next sculpture was in the form of that I was made. So for me, life was a relationship with many different worlds, and in some sense, I wondered where all these worlds come from. So let me tell you what's a deep question. I have conversations with people about the ego, you know, like people bring it up. And so they think that's deep. Oh my God, the ego, what is it deep? But for me, what is really deep is wondering what is infinity's origin. And you, in some sense, realize that infinity must exist with the comprehension of finitude. That means if we weren't small, there would be no concept of big. So in some sense, reality for a material realm is focused on shapes and sizes, you see, and the relationship of individuation. So, in some sense, the chair of existence that you're sitting on is your moment of being, and your moment of being has just a natural uh, existing physical part. Like you're just alive. There's a body here in a moment, and your eyes are open, and there's an attention. But then there is the subjective aspect of man. So what that means is one part of you is the character in the story, the other is the storyteller. The storyteller is the value giver, which in some sense comes down to the origin of your free will. So, in some sense, everything you have ever heard in life, its value is based on your clarity. It is based on your attention and awareness and the relationship of a sort of synergy between emotion, thought, and in some sense, endless imagination. Endless imagination is pretty much being it's as if like your everything in life is moving at a fast ordered speed, as if like the order of the universe, it has a certain speed. The moment you get a chaotic perception, like let's say you, if chaos was a certain kind of glasses you could wear, imagine you put on these glasses and then you would just see constant innovation. So for me, life is being generated, at least subjectively, in value based on a dance between chaos and order. Do you see? This is why a utopia never works and a dystopia never works, because if those two dynamics don't both exist, the other one doesn't. What I mean by this is not that the world's going to get darker and there's not going to be light. I'm telling you that the relationship that children on this planet are conditioned to, in some sense, grow through is a relationship built on a hamster wheel. Do you see? Because children are not taught to permit themselves innovation. And so, when you have been denied innovation, when you have been denied your creativity, you will just try to do the best you can in that cyclical job, which I think cyclical job, like you know what I mean. I've worked for some time, you know, and I mean it's understandable why you would go to the same place every day, so you get a certain exchange like of monetary value. But for me, I think the human being gets bored. You know, it gets bored because within us there is the urge of an explorer. You know, it's like you can say evolution was in some sense exploration. You know, it is not survival of the fittest, it is survival of the greatest explorer. That being who looked around more and saw more, and in doing so, its evolution was permitted to higher levels. That means for me, it's very fascinating. Let me tell you what life is. It is a bunch of creatures opening their eyes, and then as they play the games of nature, they in some sense evolve. What that means is they open up different levels of life experience. Do you see? And this is very fascinating because it's as if like everybody is given a blank piece of paper to draw on when their eyes open in this world. And in some sense, life is your painting subjectively. So for me, I noticed that at some point it was like suddenly like I came out of my it came like I how would I say it? I stepped out of the matrix of my own illusion. That means I had seen the world in a certain way, I had accepted it was only that way, and I accepted nothing else. Do you see? And so I was living this life trying to be this shape that I thought society is gonna, give a high five to with $1 million check, But I noticed like it doesn't. Life requires authentic moments to to preserve the artificialness of it. Do you see? That means any girl who has ever put on makeup has washed their face at the end of the night. She has washed off the identity that she had induced. And it's similar with all social creatures because society is a battlefield of emotional tensions based on social conditioning. That means based on your exposure to certain ways of acceptable behavior, then your mind has a way to approach. But then we talk about a free society and we say if a free society is truly free, then in some sense every being in that society can freely be themselves. But that is not the case because we all play a game. We're all our own free, unique characters. Let's say footballers on the soccer field. And so as we are there, we each bring forth a unique talent which it is society's job to allow that talent to be received properly. If you are sitting on your chair of existence, that in some sense means that your eyes, like physically, your body is changing, but your thoughts are not changing as fast as your body, simply because an emotion can keep you in a reality for a long time. For me, desire, oh my God, desire was like trying to eat the best ice cream that never melts with a spoon that's on fire. Your hand is burning, but you're tasting divinity. Do you see what your mind considers to be like next level? So one can say that life is a relationship of your eyes with how you think at first you're a thought. That means everybody thinks in story. You know what I mean? Like if somebody, like, let's say you're at a job interview, the guy's like, tell me about yourself. You're like, okay, man, it's time for me to tell this guy's story. And the story is your life, your actual history and what you've done and all your skills or whatever, in the interview situation. I'm just bringing it up as an example. But what I'm telling you is that you rip off your face to realize it was a mask. You look at the core of your beliefs and you see whether you are basing it on a certain the eagle flying up high, looking at everything, rationally analyzing the odds and probabilities, or you have an emotional bias towards the correctness of a concept. Now, both sides are extreme. It is extreme to just be rational. It's as if like I think the wives of some scientists are afraid the personalities of the scientists will become too robotic. Literally, I think. So what I'm saying by that is that logic is a tool. It is not something to always have. And what I mean by that is not be illogical, but sometimes, like, you tell me what is logical about a risk. You go tell a businessman, You know, it's illogical to do that thing, and the businessman will be like, buddy, you don't know how the streets of the business world work, and the person makes a risk, and there's a chance of loss, but then suddenly success comes in through certain tactics. So what I'm telling you is that there is a there's a man named Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj. He is, in some sense, what was considered by his community an enlightened sage, an enlightened uh, wise man, a liberated wise man. That means he had seen a certain truth, you know. And so he has this quote, which is this quote that's like very interesting. He says, "When I see that I am everything, when I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I see I am everything, that is love. And in between my life moves, as if this human being had attained a certain concentration and focus to how reality was happening, that he had realized his attention, like pretty much his consciousness, is oscillating between an experience of emptiness and an experience of omnipresence. So, as if a part of him was the whole universe being, just being here, and then a part of him was an empty temporary thought. So, this is why I think enlightenment, the concept, was very profound. It had to do with the introduction of novelty beyond the characteristics of a dualistic view. So, what I'm telling you is there are people on this planet who've had a certain experience where suddenly their mind has become incredibly silent. This silence is because of two reasons. It's because, first, they have disengaged as living as a thought. By doing so, their desires are no longer induced by how hard they think about something. Their desires arise naturally. Now, those desires that arise naturally, how you conduct them is by instantly going through stillness and silence. This is what I'm telling you. This is the cure for depression for the whole world. Just go towards stillness and silence, and a state where you're not trying, time is not scaring you. When you get out of that battlefield where time and inevitability of mortality is scaring you, you come to a moment where you just appreciate, and you're just I don't want to give it a word, but it's like this natural gratefulness that your eyes have been opened so far to the world. And then you notice that in how people said humility is just being your natural self. It is being yourself prior to having to create a problem to give an artificial answer to. All those people who are faking it till you make it, man, that's such a waste of time. You should just make it. Do you know what I mean? That means you should just allow yourself to live a life where, if the mind and body were given ultimate freedom, there would be in some sense no restriction of thought. life will be recognized to be a sort of operating system based on the immediate considerations you have. For me, the value of the day is based on the pattern that my attention flows throughout the day. What I pay attention to throughout the day is not something to be managed like a busy CEO, but is something to be understood as a level of life sensitivity where time is not accelerating your speed so you can't be yourself throughout the day. Do you see what I mean? That means when you conquer fear, you're also conquering where time is taking you. And some sages have said that some people walk, like in some sense, everybody's walking to the grave. It's just that some people, before walking to the grave, they want to see the world smile before they die. But they want that smile to be had by the future of the civilization. I find that children are not being taught to be beings that have a universal affinity for reality. This is so crucial. All our problems, we're like savages right now, but like we are savage minds. Our physically, like our bodies wear suits, and ties and sit down at expensive tables and speak. But we are still savages because we have not, in some sense, integrated our perception with a universal vision. And I found something that, it's like I see a lot of Persian guys that don't like the movie 300, but I'll tell you this. For me, I don't really have an opinion on the movie 300 because it's a film. As a film, it does a great job. But as the concept behind the film, well, that's just how the writers wanted to convey the thing. I don't agree with it, but at the same time, freedom is freedom. So what I'm telling you is that there's a concept which the best way I can describe it is that it's your pure self. This pure self is, in some sense, a moment of endless spontaneous conceptualization. That means I've experienced certain states. It's like people say writer's block. I find that ridiculous. Sometimes it's not writer's block. Sometimes it's how you're looking is too narrow. So what I'm telling you is that there are states of being where, like, imagine looking at a river and you see different objects floating in this river, or you just look at different things. Like, imagine it's fall and there's a river and all the leaves are falling into the river, so you're just noticing different leaves pass by in the river, right? So it's like this endless stream of conceptualization that occurs once the ego has become so transparent that it's become an observer of nature. Once you become an observer of nature, you in some sense become a master of the observed because you are seeing how things are taking place, not as an I thought, not as like a person with a certain shape and certain solidified individuality. With like the way Mr. Within is sharing these talks is, I want you to think of your intelligence like, let's say, water, for example. There's ice, there's the solid state of, like, existential perception, and then there is a liquid state of existential perception, which is more like a stream. In this strange book I wrote, I call it consciousness streams. you know That means stream of, it's like literally how your attention is opening meaning in an object with an empty nature. So pretty much it's as if your eyes are not projecting out light beams, but based on what they see, they are organizing the site, which means whatever information that enters your sphere of awareness is in some sense being placed on the shelves of your belief based on its validity to you, and that is really based on your experience, your tolerance, your patience, and your curiosity to explore the unknown. For me, I was like, okay, who's the best teacher on this planet? I realized it's not people. This is why I say Mr. Within. I found something that is more profound. That it's like some people, oh my God, New Age community is like very imaginative. You know, the New Age community is pretty much like an environment where synchronicity has become God. But what I'm telling you is that the self within the self is being observed by a selfless moment of being. Due to the selfless nature of this inner presence of a witness that's receiving information to even describe it or communicate it or contextualize it, you find your simple presence. Anybody who's trying to live a complex life and you're depressed, you need to find your simple self. Your simple self that has nothing to do with your intellect. It has to do with how you were as a child. This is why children's minds can find solutions quicker than others, not because they're younger and their brains work better. No, because their eyes have not been sculpted into a certain limited format of acceptance. For me, a newborn child is a moment as powerful as the greatest rebels in history who were like, this idea that I have been fed by the world is not my taste, and they just rebel. you know, from the Che Guevaras to the Guy Fawkes. So what I'm telling you is like, once you access your authentic self, with that moment of being, of just simple presence, you will notice that you have been only considering intelligence through words and, in some sense, movement of sound. You will want, so for me, I was like, if I'm reading more concepts, let's say like there was a time where for me libraries were mountains to climb, but then at some point I was like, it can't just be concepts. You see, truth can't just be a concept. And if it is believed to be and hallucinated to be as, it will be limited. This is what I'm saying. If God is limited, if God is limitless, the concept of God is a limitless concept, and man is made in the image of God, how can man be limited? It's a universal metaphor for the infinite capacity of mankind, God, but it's unfortunately it's being marketed through stories of intense social restriction, which can be argued whether it is right or wrong. I mean, every generation could have a different opinion. We're 8 billion people here. In some sense, 8 billion worlds. When I give this talk, and let's say, a couple people listen to it, it's as if the talk has split itself into different worlds. So it's as if 5 different people, for example, have 5 different ways they've heard the same thing I've said. And this is why language is profound. We are designed for collective survival because we realize we each have a separate, a unique talent we can share with the world. This talent is not limited to just what normality values. It is just what helps the world have a more efficient and wiser and just it's more street smarter survival. When I say street smart survival, that means you find a way by looking at many ways. Anyways, the chair of existence is pretty much how your beliefs have molded yourself. And when you wonder about the self, you will in some sense dive into your beliefs and journey to the depths of your earliest memories to realize right now you are not your earliest memories, but you have access to them. So if you have access to them, it's as if the mind is like a time traveler in, like your memory and imagination, but physically you're in just one part of the world as a physical being. So when I said there's a liquid state of consciousness, let's say, there's also a gas state of consciousness, which is empty, the empty, it's what I call it universal intelligence looking through emptiness. That's what I call everything in some sense to myself, for myself sometimes, yeah. Plato has this quote where he says, as above, so below. He means the patterns in the microcosm resemble the patterns in the macrocosm. If they do, then we are physically servants of nature, but internally masters of our world. Responsibility only blooms once you have lived for yourself enough to see that it is time to live for your world. You can only live for life if you truly live for life, for all of life, for all beings. I was like, fuck it. I'm sorry to say it, but at some point I was like, fuck it, I'll give it a try. Let me just live for all beings and the greatness that they can potentially have within them. It doesn't matter who they are, what they are, how they look like, in what way they see. In my, like, there are sometimes I get visions and I turn these visions into science fiction. Like this science fiction novel I'm writing. I'm writing this science fiction novel called The Messenger of Giants. In this science fiction novel, there is a notion that there are many kinds of beings in one world. In the year 5025, not only extraterrestrials are applying for citizenship onto planet Earth, but also robotic intelligence is walking alongside man in the markets. So what I'm telling you is that it doesn't matter how you hear these words, it matters how these words are understood in some sense by being a mirror for you to realize you are the value giver of the world. It is your mind that is making my talk interesting. So it is your mind that chooses to see what it could not see before. Self-inquiry, once found through silence and stillness, will activate the greatest ability to work with movement and noise. Once your world has become the harmony of a universal dance between chaos and order, you then become the actor and the audience member at the same time. You become the timeless gazing at the temporary, and you are also the temporary gazing at the timeless. You are a man trying to get to heaven, and then you are heaven looking through the eyes of man. Live an incredible life. Because a philosopher will tell you, why not? Much blessings and namaste. Thank you for listening. Live for mankind.